folks. I'm sure we can manage it. We're going to do conceptual speed dating, which was actually invented by Andrew Murphy. I think he just walked out. Oh, there you are. At an event that was family. And all of us have continued it over the years. So it's very simple. And before I explain, and I'm going to ask you to go around the room and say the number 1 or 2 and remember it. So starting at 1.
1, 2.
1,
2.
1,
2. 1.
2. 1,
2.
1,
2.
1, 2.
1.
2.
1. 2.
1.
2.
1.
2.
1.
2.
1,
2.
1,
2.
1,
1.
1. 2.
1.
Jake.
1, 1, 2.
2. 1. 1. I've already said 2.
Okay, everybody remember? All the 2, oh, you don't have one? 1. Did you have one?
I'll take 2.
2. Can all the 2s stand up and all the 1s sit down? Okay. So all the 2s come over here.
Erin, how do I turn off? Do they use the thing where you say never turn off?
All right. Okay, folks, don't talk on the way. Oops. All right, good. Okay, so this is just the performative moment so you can remember if you're 1 or if you're 2. The 1s, you will never leave where you are.
But you can find your place.
But you can move right now if you want. And I suggest the clumps move because you're going to need a seat next to you. So if all the 1s could make sure they have a seat next to them, that would be great. What? Who's at the post?
Oh, okay. So they're not going to find their space?
They're doing it right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just told them. Okay. Great. So in a more ordinary environment, we would say go clockwise or counterclockwise. As you can see, this is more like go scrambled. The 2s, every 5 minutes, when we tell you through the bell and through the thing, even if you're in the middle of a word, you move to somewhere else. You're not allowed to stay. So when you hear the bell, every 2 moves. Just find an empty chair next to somebody, okay? So now every 2 find a place. And there are going to be 2 missing because Brian and I are both 2s. But don't talk yet. So no, you give me a sign, and I'll do it. Okay. Okay, everybody, one last thing. Yeah, but I'm a 2, and Brian's a 2. So who are missing a 2? Uh-oh. Okay, who are missing? You're missing a 2. You're missing a 2, and somebody over there is missing a 2.
There's you 2.
Okay. And you're missing 1 too. Okay, if you're missing someone, go together and change. One of you change your numbers. Okay. So now, everybody have their reading. This is. We're going to ask you to speed date around one concept only, which means that it's totally okay if you spend the first 4 or 5 speed dates finding it. And the concept is thinking. Anything else?
No. So just so you have exactly 5 minutes, then you cut off even in the middle of the sentence, and then you pick up the conversation again with the next person for 5 minutes.
Ready? I'm ready. Okay. It's a mouthful. Have you read the back? So like how to study.
No, so I think he's defining that makes sense. So there are like ESs and they all part of the non-equality
Okay, so we spent 3 minutes introducing ourselves.
I had this question throughout the whole thought is related to part interpretation, arbitrary or restrictions. Processing costs, thinking to me is something like it seems like you should be restricted but thought is also emotion too.
So consciousness, mind,
I wanted to say thought is also captured like
Yeah, absolutely.
the
I think it's true. I think that,
so he's like
He's already thinking to think prior to with you know, I feel like a spine where you movement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the same goes for seeing. So all these modalities are various sexual experiences, seeing, feeling, touching. All these are like in control.
It just looks like
I have a very similar diagram. We have to
nice to meet you.
Let's talk about that. It's like the kind of thing that speed dating is also like at the sense lab. They try to know what he says. I was just discussing with the other person. Okay, now there are some like there are other when did you okay. Oh, I've been reading it. It was going to maybe I was because I printed some of them. I have a double. I don't know if my back was getting. Well, so now yeah. But anyways, I got a little bit. So if I, yeah, maybe I can it's funny about speed dating because I'm trying to
So think about what's in your so the feeling is predicated. So yesterday we said a little bit about that's also the thing that's made for so it doesn't continue
allows us to think about from that message. I was just thinking that it's so important for the perspective about thinking as activity that has to be all of kind of this when it says just like before I think it's crazy. I'm just thinking in general, like one thing I thought about a multitude of persons. This process, like if I read Manny or if I read other talks about the place that there's always a no states that like so one of those striking aspects. It's like people say, you know, all of a sudden they get this condition. I think that I had no idea. All of a sudden I had no idea. What is that? How I can get into this spot? How I started in this spot? that's like a version. That's what I'm wondering. That's when you said that yesterday. I was really interested in that because there must be some sort of basically you were implying that those solutions in place maybe has its own language. I don't know, it's a lot, but that was a way of expression. They let you know there's some food that they need. So that's what
Thanks for doing that.
Okay. Oh yeah, we were just
my understanding of the thought is that how you make the distinction between thinking and thought and sort of like thought, the way that it fits with how it's conducted, it's distilling, it's continually trying to make you, but thinking is a process of so it's selective communication that the thinking emotion is constantly distilling and restricting your tolerance.
yeah, we were trying to thought of the science arbitrarily narrowing larger crowds. Because within that larger crowd, there's kind of feelings that we're thoughts. So there's different levels of thought, which is very much like Whitehead about certain tendencies that integrated together and there's a lot of
So like the gods.
so we were trying to translate it. So these thoughts often discussing things willing. So we were trying to think of like what is the meaning about being was a subjective meaning. So that would correspond to
discussion about power. Talks about power.
It's interesting because
Once power is realized, so how does that tie into the subjective aim as well as the subjective aim? Talk about the will and knowledge and so the way in which that needs to play out.
all of the ethics leverage so that subjective aim takes Well, it's the power to see what it is. Oh, yeah.
And then maybe.
Yeah. It might be so, yeah. But it's scratch power, it's augmentation power, so it's power. Okay. The pleasure is the symptom of the feeling. Consciousness is the pleasure being there on the level of the So that's like the parachute, but then he says there's a continuity, right? So that crowd is feeling at the proposition level. There's a certain sort of like waves. But so the pleasure is actually thought is science restriction. Complex has to be below it. Pleasure talks about the affect, restricted expression of the affect of the integrity. But it's amazing how it
Actually, I got a very
yeah, what's amazing?
And then and I think it's also like, seems like the way he talks about it, thinking at the same time is needed of which we are already acting. So it seems like he's talking about how the organs are already in this like vibration ways. And I was curious about that. And then he was saying like, oh, we just talked about this, right? And he was saying something like, that it feels surrounded, like that it is distraction, but it's not without layers of thought that already happened in this moment. Yeah, and how it's not completely outside of that. And I was so interested in, like, I was just imagining, you know, the thought, and then sort of this cloud around it. And yeah, like it's like vibratory. Yeah, but like I love this because I think like
but that it is a place.
Yeah.
Because like it's surplus. So it's that's in the body that we affect so once that's happening, that it does always it's funny because the logic is the same. So like green versus rays, I wrote down like a Philistine and I'm doing but so I think that he is trying to get at something that's a little bit more unsettled. That is not against, that is not just what it's contract. That's pretty good. I wrote down here, what are the music repertoires available? Obviously, that's always an interesting question. I think about how far it is, we were talking about so think about power, about how much I can think. Affect first, what is the system? How are those connections made? How are those intersections made? I'm saying that as a historical subject, there's a great
Oh, right. Then what is available?
I don't think that that is my mind. Again, I don't think that the subjects that but I do understand that's why
Where are you guys at?
So we were just talking about I was posing this question.
I know that.
So I think this is so if I have that in to my analysis in the expansion thought, it could happen
For years I've been thinking about where else beaches are always I've seen Whitehead very attentive to one of the really interesting things about that is that they very rarely move their language. I mean, they can, but if you're working with it, you go through it to find out. So if you're busy, well, you feel it again in your body. This is what's so interesting. You feel it again as well. So if you've been working choreographically with those things, you find it all that you have to and so I've been for years thinking about the thought of movement. Right? So it's clearly a thinking practice, but it's not a thinking practice that means to sit in for you get to primitive understanding. It's it touches you in the feeling. So a lot of the thinking here in terms of disassociating myself from thinking, like being interested in thinking as a vector that has so much more texture than what we might understand as a set of verbal statements that are in our head.
That get locked there, right?
What your experience is, but I'm not someone who knows what I think until I'm doing it, I'm writing it, to be in the process, to know how to think has stabilized. And that means that people, that way they're all having, you know, like, is it coming? Is it happening? Am I gonna happen? Yeah. You know, and so I have to think about that. And to go back to education. The orientation of our students is though for us to be so we ask them to know that in advance. So we train
But actually, you know, trying to get them to teaching academic writing courses, where what happened is writing very much already and I talk about this I can access to it, but I also it's so adorable Number one. Yeah, you're the one. Good. Number two. Nice to meet you. So what do you want to talk about? James. Yeah. David. So it's I can't remember which conversation. Let's go back to the most interesting oh my god, there's so much. I have been talking about repertoires of thought, talking about pleasure, talking about power. It's a really interesting conversation about how the body speaks slowly, through feeling and through affect. So that's really interesting. Ryan and I were talking about musicians as a way of representation.
Like scientists in this area of the same, so there's an old nervous system activity going on regulated by the system take place there that affect the rest of our bodies. Everybody that understands whether it's anything like consciousness or whether it's even
By no means easy, but
so many different organisms. It makes sense that you have non-scientific, completely spelled out practical sense approach to how you deal with health budget. No scientist has any clue what's actually going on. It's more like seeking to maintain a healthy ecology among the animals. If something goes wrong, see if you can restore that balance. Like the numbers coming in. But that just is what the hell do we wonder about? Do the tools they have to process that. So what do you think about
studying the body. This idea other occasions, I want my treat.
I love when you follow. How are you? Oh my God, it's been so great. So yeah, so far we talked about so I spent a lot of time on YouTube talking about body design,
And now Evaluating.
I think that might take a little bit to adjust. So that's sort of
Guiding.
that's a little bit about what that is that it's but it also, like what I said earlier, it's not one that proceeds that far as part of it, so the sort of traces that come with that law. And then the thinking is that process that happens all the time. Separate the thought itself. Yeah, always on the so it's nice that all I do is like this transmit movements have that language, body, other signs that decide which is representing other things which are also signs. So
Get my head around the sign. Thinking in terms of the sign as sign something that emerges way more
I don't think it's a representation of the sign. There's no way representation is I don't think so. Only if he's being sarcastic. I don't see it as where most people this is. I always it's interesting to talk about this. Coming to
it's not how is it
all of us.
Obviously, this is probably not the part where we're going to find it. I really understand and feel it. But then my question is, okay, so you're talking about this person, all these things that you're talking about,
I didn't think of the answer. So tell me.
well, I just, I mean, it's a self-relation. This is someone who is open. There is. When he gets in the mind of like some other it just does.
Okay, we're finished. Oh no, but we're not finished. We're gonna talk. So sit down and move your chairs in any way you want. I did, but I wanted to have it. So I think we have 30 more minutes. Is that right? Yeah. So we wanted to take the next 30 minutes to speed date as a group. Maybe 15 more minutes.
Oh my God.
15 more minutes. We just would love to hear from you. What did you find out?
What 30?
30 minutes. So we have a time issue.
Let's expand time.
What is that?
So I don't know. Yeah.
Can I ask Jamie to finish her sentence? That was really brutal and interesting. So I would just like we were the one about habits.
So the thing is two things at once. Like one is like the habit of sometimes because you were talking about habits and also it can be orienting as well as limiting. And a friend of mine gave me this big clue about how habits can also be security. Like so you stay with it because it's like even if it's a shitty habit, you're like, but I know this habit so well, so I know where I'm going to end up. Perfect. But I like the idea you brought about can also be orientating, so it can pull you out of being stuck in a way.
Well, it's not me. It's Nietzsche, and I don't remember where. I just wanted to make a link. I don't remember where. I think it's like in the gay science, or anyways, like that just strikes me like Nietzsche. Sometimes we falsely maybe represent as that kind of like thinker always into the wind, you know, with eagles and mountains and like, you know, you have all these movements and at some point in the gay science, it just says, I'm really a person that needs habits, you know, I have my routine in the morning, I wake up, and if I don't have that, I'm completely like screwed up. And I was like, what? I mean, okay. And I was thinking about that, why some habits just like help ourselves to orient and to have kind of just like some points where you can put your step on to go like further away. But some of them are just like these kind of nets of traps, you know? And it's because it's going a bit fast. We're thinking about that passage when the 966 when he speaks about the lazy routine. You know?
So what page is that?
It's page. Well, 5, yeah. So just like the sorry, we
Can you read it?
Yeah. All reevaluating values, what would that be? All the spontaneous movements must be there, the new, stronger ones of the future. Only they still bear false names and estimations and have not yet become conscious of themselves, courageously becoming conscious and saying yes to what has been achieved, extricating ourselves from the lazy routine of old valuations, which degrade us in the best and strongest things we have achieved. Yeah, sorry. Anyways, the important part was only that lazy routine of old valuations, which degrade us in the best and strongest things that we achieve.
That relates to my page 234, 244. It's about number 38 June blog, where he says, knowing is how we come to feel that we already know something. Doesn't mean combating a feeling of newness and transforming apparently new into something old. It reminded me of Whitehead's notion of the personal historic root, where there's something that's taken back up as a genetic element in the constitution of a new occasion, but that creates a certain formal correspondence to what before. So all of that emphasis on the discontinuity of the I is counterbalanced by the continuity that is created by the awareness of something old taking precedence over the newness each time. So that's the function of habit. And it seems totally negative here, but as Ubea was saying, it becomes a necessary component even of the revaluation of values.
Can I ask a question? Roberto and I got to a point where Roberto was like, oh, we should ask Brian. And I'm like, let's ask our thinking. And so I'm going to ask this room. So we kind of came up with this possibility that will be a vector in thinking as becoming thought. And if that's the case, how?
The room is thinking.
I can't answer that, but I have another question, which is we were just talking with Sky, and it relates to this question because it's a thinking with how the vector happens in thought and also potentially in attention. And I was really interested in how thought and attention relate to each other, or because it seems like both are kind of happening in the world. And I was thinking about the different vectors of how thought happens and the different vectors of how attention happens, and sort of the complexity between both of them to conscious decision. And so how, like, it seems like there are all these different ways of attention that is happening, and some of them have this directionality of like sort of focusing onto something, and then some of them have this directionality of going all the directions in the space like a floodlight. And we thought like how some, the thought kind of bubbles up, but then thinking seems to like move it and create these like choreographies and how it's like spirals sometimes, or like jumps and then multiplies and then folds down. And so I was just thinking about these modes of movement.
I think I just want to add to that, because I really like that when you're talking about this choreography, because it reminds me on page 4, and this is 28, when you talked about non-linguistic communication and gestures, right? And thinking about, which reminds me in some ways, and maybe and the way you talked about error, right? And error deriving from a particular kind of organic communication, which I'm thinking of the relationship between this kind of communication and Whitehead's discussion of causal efficacy, symbolic reference, and opening up the space of a proposition. And this is precisely where error comes in, right? You can have something like an interesting proposition that may be false, right? So maybe we could start. I don't know. I mean, my temptation is to start thinking about non-linguistic communications and gestures in relationship to what Whitehead talks about in terms of causal efficacy.
Yeah, I was sort of related to that, translating it. I was constantly translating my mind into Whiteheadian vocabulary and feeling that it was sort of weirdly convergent. But in relation to the question of, I was asking where is the proposition? And on the bottom of page 2, notice 38 in the line, it seems as though he's talking about thought as a sign, but then it emerges from this crowd of feelings, desires, aversions, and other thoughts, so it's kind of thinking within the thought at another level, often scarcely distinguishable from a willing or a feeling. And that coming together of willing and feeling reminded me of the coming together of physical and conceptual prehensions and a hybrid prehension, with the willing maybe corresponding to the triggering of appetite as a subjective aim, and then the feeling corresponding to a simple physical feeling. But the proposition is always a hybrid between those two, that encompasses a much larger field of potential playing out than peaks in the conscious awareness and the thought. So that's it seems to me that, and then later he talks about affect, and the will's power is affect. So I think you could really translate it into propositional terms like this.
Myra.
Yeah, we were talking about that at some point. In a way, very difficult to read Nietzsche in a room where there's a board with the word Whitehead so big there. So it becomes a vector in the thinking. So you cannot not move with that cut. So we were thinking a lot about force and how it was related, where force was in Whitehead. And so we were saying that for Whitehead, feelings are prehensions or activities of entering into relations. And these activities of entering into relations are multiple. There's not only one way to enter into relation. And how the world is made by these differential ways of entering into relation. But what makes the differential is the force, in the how forces enter into an interplay. But that how, then, in Whitehead's vocabulary would be the affective tonality. So perhaps there's a link there with force and affective tonality in terms of this pictorial quality of how locations enter into relation to other locations. And then finally, when you said this thing about where is the proposition in Whitehead, I mean, I apologize, but really it's very, where is the proposition? I think that that's the concept of mentality. So if the location of experience is this interplay between prehension of physical feelings, or positive prehension is describing physical feelings. The physical feeling is also at all times accompanied by conceptual prehension. It's at all times accompanied by more than, which is the mentality, the flash of novelty. Perhaps there's propositional character.
I sort of feeding back on all of this, I was thinking about that paragraph on page 3 on the will, 38.8. It really links to what you were saying, Myra. The will is not only a complex of feeling and thinking, but above all, also an affect. That affect of command, and then a bit lower, this consciousness is present in every will, and it's that tense alertness, that clear gaze focused on one thing only, that exclusive valuation, this and nothing else is now necessary, etc. And so I was thinking that the interplay here is very interesting between the Nietzschean necessity, which is the matter of fact, how things happen, and then the question of manner again as it comes up both in Nietzsche and in Whitehead. And I was thinking a lot about, I said this example to a couple of people, but I was thinking a lot about non-linguistic thinking, which is where my own work is situated mostly. So I was thinking about it in terms of how thinking catches us in the act. I'm sure we've all had this experience of only knowing what we think because we've written it, and the writing thinks us into thinking. But this is a really strong experience for me as a dancer, that there is no way to use language to get back to a dance movement. It doesn't work. You have to move it again to find it again. But when you move it again, you can't move into the movement that was, because there's no thought there. There's no vibration, there's no excess, there's no force. So you have to move it beyond where it could be thought. And so you're always moving in the beyondness of at the edge where thinking can happen. And if you're not doing that, you know, because you don't feel it. And this is even if you're working with people who've never read a word of Whitehead or Nietzsche or whatever, they'll tell you, I don't feel it. No, and they could be doing the step. You can be in a ballet class. It doesn't have to be in a contemporary form. So the feeling of it has nothing to do with the seeing of it or the explaining of it. it's a really qualitative. And so I was thinking what you were saying, Brian, is in the peak. So that's the interesting thing also with what Chenga was saying, that it's a kind of peak, that consciousness, but it's actually not where thinking peaks. Thinking peaks in the field, and it reorients. Its necessity has to be felt in order for the reorientation to happen. So it's always that relationship, I think, between the matter and the manner and how they come together.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Cheers. See if you can see me. We were talking about dance. I don't dance, but my sister does. And I had a Hegelian thought, if I can bring it here in this community. And really the dialectic between mediation and immediacy, which has been with me for a long time. It was very inspiring, and it was probably what brought me to philosophy in the end, about how you get to the spontaneous immediacy of that relation, of that movement in and with the body, through a lot of mediation steps. If I look at my sister, how much she trains like crazy, there is a lot of control and disciplining that is very mediating. I don't know whether I would call it thinking, but thinking is per se a mediation. It is a fracture, it is a separation, and it is a mediation in the relation with the world, with the body, with oneself. So, and in a flow, if you keep that flow going between fractures, mediation, and a regained immediacy, which you could, the Hegelian move would be to, that it's not the first immediacy, which is just a kind of a blob, right? It's a regained immediacy that went through ways of fractures, which also means wounds and mediation, and then there is a possibility of a regained immediacy. I was wondering whether that might echo some here. And there is a way of recuperating that moment of mediation by means of thinking, because it's a necessary moment of fracturing that might or not lead to a regained immediacy. But I mean, I don't have the experience myself, I'm just what my sister tells me.
This sort of relates, but then it goes a little bit differently. But then I was thinking about how they say in dance or whatever, like first thought, best thought. But then they also say first thought, slave thought, like that conditioned thought. So you have to like, okay, think of it, like make sure that's really the one you're actually thinking, or is that the one you just get taught to think, you know? Which through ecology.
I was also thinking in the sense of the dance or the training. I mean, this part that in page 3 that he says, now that every thought first arises, meaning dead and floating, really only as occasional for attempts to interpret or for arbitrary fixing, that a multitude of persons to participate in all thinking, blah blah. We are trained the opposite way, not to think about thinking as we think. And then in there he said, in all of this, something of our total state expresses itself in a sign form. So, because I was trying to say like, so even when then the thinking manifests in a sign form, what is that, right? So that we are not thinking about thinking in this way, in this linguistic, but also not even in a way that can. So it seems like even thought in that sense is this kind of maybe the mentality of a process that is always environmental, and then it expresses as a sign form, and then he said we have to interpret it. That I think this interpretation is a way of technique. It's a bit what we talked in the beginning, like, okay, once you realize that these thinkings, these sparklings are happening in a complexity, you still almost need a technique to be able to think as you think, you know what I mean, to be close to the crowd that makes this sparkle, and then you have to interpret this sign, which is also a way of immanently attend or be conscious, but in a different way that we are talking about in common sense consciousness.
Yes, go for it.
Because I have been struggling with that sentence that we are trained the opposite way, not to think about thinking as we think, and I think that it's impossible to think about thinking as we think. This way I need to fracture. it's impossible precisely because as you cannot step behind, as you cannot see yourself seeing, you cannot think about thinking as you think. And we were talking about the fact that even for Whitehead, the moment of actualization is private. It's not accessible. So you can go back to that and allow it to happen, but there is always a delay, a fracture. And I think this is the space for thinking, and it's also the space for consciousness, or what remains of it in that fracture.
I think in impossibility there is a lot of productivity. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think
sure.
it's impossible, but it does open like an environmental.
Because it is, yeah, exactly, it needs impossibility.
Myra has
in that direction.
Go for it, Myra.
There was a hand here.
No, just to complement what you were saying, in terms of like, there's always a delay. Well, there's always delays all the time. And that's, I mean, even in experience, it's always delaying from, there's always gaps. I mean, I don't see them as fractures though. But as other kinds of everything could.
Fracture is a very positive term for me, sorry. It's not
Yeah. No, it's just that, I mean, in terms of the dance that you were saying, I trained with dance for more than 10 years. And I've had different experiences, but one of them is within disciplinary tradition of a lot of control and a lot of pain and a lot of fractures. It actually teaches not to feel your body.
Yeah. We have Susanna and Ryan.
Yes, I just want to join in and to underline what she's saying, that if sometimes we have in our forming classes for students which have been trained as ballet dancers, and this is very hard because control is a different stuff.
Yeah.
And I agree totally. Let your body think. This is the point.
Yes.
Yes, and this is the difficulty.
Yes.
And if they get in that kind of way out of control, and therefore the inhabited structures in the incorporated structures are at the devil. Yes, to get rid of them is a hard work.
It's true.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, on page 6, notebook 5, summer 1886. I think really, what you were just saying is really clear. He talks about the importance of the body, and then he says, even if the center of consciousness doesn't coincide with the physiological center, it would still be possible that the physiological center is also the psychic center. So consciousness is not obviously the whole of thinking, but there's a thinking, some form of thinking or feeling that is mental in nature that goes along with the operations of the body, which means there's thinking happening always. So the I, like consciousness flickers, like Whitehead says, the I is completely discontinuous, as Nietzsche is saying, but still the thinking continues on the level of the immanence to the thought.
In one word, that's interoception.
And then very short. It's always a good way to make fun when there is such a stuck-up situation. Yes, and it was a precarious situation in the teaching class, and then something invented Mr. Controletti, and he is a mixture from control and confetti. Yes, and then we have different ways to throw him out of the room. Sometimes we say, "Dear Mr. Controletti, we know you are a little bit tired now." And otherwise we slam the door behind him. So, and this is a kind of way that frees thinking in the body.
That's where we got to kick him out from here if he comes. But maybe he won't get here all the way from Vienna. Bianca.
No, I just wonder on page 5 in the beginning, to talk about Diego, and then we think about thinking as we think. When he writes that every thought is a total stage,
as it's a total state, then we cannot think about thinking as we think, because every thought is a total state, so we cannot split either the state of thought or feeling. And then in the end, when he writes that next thought is a sign of how the total power situation has now shifted again, it's something that we have discussed in the speed dating. So it's actually the next thought that shapes what thought has been.
Nice. Thanks. Yes.
Michael.
Oh, and Michael, and then Hanad.
I just wanted to change tack a little, and if it's unhelpful, I apologise. I was really taken yesterday with what you started with when you're talking about propositions and the difficulty of language. And I was thinking, we were talking in my groups about signs and what Nietzsche meant by signs, and we didn't get anywhere. Well, no, we got lots of places. But I was thinking at the top of page 6, I know he's talking about cause and effect, but he's talking about the problem, one of the problems of cause and effect is that it's found a fixed form in the grammatical functions of language. And elsewhere he says we haven't got rid of God whilst we still have grammar. I mean, I'll jump to the end. I was thinking about, because when we're thinking and talking about thinking, we're working within our normal linguistic forms, and I suddenly was thinking, maybe propositions are ungrammatical. You know, and we're not to be thinking about things doing things or things thinking things, a person thinking things. And one of the points is, how can we think and talk sort of ungrammatically? And this was getting back to the sign. So I think it's on page, where was the bit we ended up with it, Hannah? Page 4, on 28, the second bit. When it says, all movements are signs of something happening within, and what happens within expresses itself in such alterations of form. Thinking is not itself what happens, but likewise just a sign language. So just to reinforce what we were saying yesterday about the problems of language. And then I couldn't work out what he means by signs, but he's talking about sign language, which is non-grammatical, or at least a different grammatical form. Maybe the proposition has been ungrammatical or non-grammatical.
Yeah, I was thinking that for me, one of the concepts that elucidate or enflesh is like incompossibility between like how to like thinking or self-thinking. The concept of struggle. It's on page 5. Because I think there is a lot of emphasis on the idea in Nietzsche that there is always something, a multiplicity that resists the totalization of the whole field of experience. So, I think for me, this idea that there is always something, not something, but a process that resists the definition of experience, and that is primary to, prior to the totalization of the thinking process itself. So for me, that is important, and so I tend to say, with regards to that yes, totally. Like there is, you can. I mean, not you, but the relation can think you, and actually, like I was saying this to someone, you happen to the relation, and not like the other way around. So yes, I mean, there is always a thought or a process of thought, a mode of thought that is already prehending you before you prehend it.
That links really beautifully to what Bianca was saying about time, because the struggle takes time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just above what you read, he talks about signs. Thoughts are signs of the play and struggle of the affects. They're always connected to their hidden roots, and that connects to his notion of signs as symptoms. So if we displace our notion of signs from sort of a semiotic system operating on the same level and think of it as symptomatic, then it might help.
Yes, Catherine and Roland.
I just loved having the gift of this text. Nietzsche was also someone quoted by my mother, and usually an alcoholic splendor, so I can't read them myself. So I'm grateful for this opportunity. And I'm getting much resonance around the sense of the unutterable complication in the whole cloud of the crowd of the necessary subversions, and it's very helpful in interpreting the incredible complexity of the comprehensive flow in Whitehead of the whole past of the world into the actual becoming occasion. And it captures the complexity of then the compressant process that's emerging. I just want, but Nietzsche would always find something negative to say despite all of his affirmativeness, so I want to do that in interest of just saying why we're supplementing Nietzsche with Whitehead, or maybe it's vice versa here. But I hear no sense of the world flowing in, none at all. I hear a brilliant discovery of the body, the organism, and the incredible material multiplicity, the manifold of beings making up our organism. But I hear no reflection at all on the world flowing in, nor of the past flowing in. So he's deconstructing time in its banal, causal, Newtonian linearity, straight time, and we need that. But I don't hear more than the most minimal hint of the alternative concept of a rhythmic temporality that would be the very vibratory pulse of the whole material world flowing into your body, and therefore you're thinking at every moment.
Yeah, Roland and Brian.
I was still thinking about will and thought and thinking and thought and how thinking becomes thought and so on. And I agree absolutely. It's about appetite. That's the important. So Whitehead does not talk about will a lot. If I try to remember, I can't remember one passage really talks about will. And so what I thought, given page 2 at the bottom, when he talks about the almost indistinguishability of will and thought and this kind of bubbling up and so on, that maybe will comes only in when we are done. So when a thought is done, like when you've written a paper or whatever event it is, then there is kind of an access to it that wills beyond subjectivity to be in existence. So thought or thinking, it becomes a thought, right, that wills. There's many in our bodies, there are many of these wills, and also in the world, I guess, that want to be perpetuated. Thinking is maybe disturbing will.
So,
isn't will appetite?
Well, since Whitehead doesn't talk about it in Whiteheadian terms, I would say it's not, because the appetite is much more open. It's something that has to do with desire, has to do with the ability to disturb the past, for instance, not to just perpetuate it. And the will seems to this what wants to be perpetuated in us, for instance, right? As something that remains present.
What about the decision and the prevention? Is that not a will?
Exactly. That's my point. My point is that's not the will.
That's not.
It's different, right? So difference in the will.
Brian, and then
No, just responding to Catherine. I sort of actually do see both those things in this text. I mean, if, again, supplementing with Whitehead, Whitehead always talks about every experience coming with the witness of the body, and he says the body is just the closest region of the outside world to our experience. So if you think of the body as part of the environment, sort of connected to the vectors coming from around it, then I think you sort of overcome that. But then also when he talks about everything we know we've already known, and we're translating, we're translating something new into something old, that creates a kind of, well.
see the hints. It's just there's a whole lot more of the world coming into us through Whitehead than our own body. It's just it's the threshold. Right, it's the peculiarly intimate bit of the world. That's what calls the body. And that's as far as each of us.
I think there's one more, and then I think if I'm watching the time, we have to stop, so you can finish.
Actually, I wanted to start, which is perfect. I have been thinking about the discussion of habits and habitus, and connecting that with the experience of some of you who are artists might know about that, the Alexander technique, which works very much on the brain habits of the body, and thinking about how habits, giving the fluidity and the non-fixity of whatever we are necessary to hold us together, and at the same time our patterns of compensation that might be very painful. So there is a moment of liberation, and I was missing the word liberation, which is essential. And my experience with Alexander technique is that is a process of liberation from habits which are hurting towards habits which might be more propositional, is that word, in a sense of opening up possibilities.
I want to thank you for playing speed dating with us. I think there's a break now.
Thank you.